Welcome back to Fast Market on the TD Ameritrade Network. I'm Tom White, joined by my co-host Kevin Hinks. But let's bring in our next guest for our cash tag segment, and that's Megan Brantley, the Vice President of Research at LikeFolio. Megan, you get the luxury of talking about beauty, hair care, and everything with Ulta to a couple of older men that don't go into those stores, most likely. So when you're looking at data and the reopening trade, we mentioned that with the airlines, people are traveling, people are getting out, people are going back to work. There's actually people in our building now. Are you seeing positive sentiment data going into this earnings result for Ulta?
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. And I don't know, I'm still going to give you guys the benefit of the doubt that you may sneak in and get some skincare products or maybe, maybe some nice things like that. But, when we look at Ulta, this is kind of a similar setup in how we talked about Stitch Fix yesterday. And all of these macro trends should be setting up in favor of Ulta. You've got people returning to the office. We saw a significant spike even just this last week. I think those mentions on our end are pacing over 100% year over year. So people are, going back into work. We also even have things like mall shopping mentions. Those are up 15% year over year. So people are getting back out there. And one thing that I think is really interesting is a lot of times we like to look at specific macro trends. So for Ulta, a good base would be listening to consumers talking about going shopping in a store, because for a cosmetic provider like Ulta, that in-store experience is really important. As a user, you want to be able to see what that makeup shade looks like against your skin. Is it a good match? You want to be able to feel it. Does it feel greasy? Does it feel nice? Like, these are things that are really hard to translate online. And while Ulta did a great job of transitioning to this over the pandemic, you can see the significant kind of in-store boost. Those mentions are pacing up 58% year over year, which I think is a good sign for Ulta. Whenever we look at just the overall trend of people talking about going shopping in a store, those are up by about 20% year over year. So this is an instance where Ulta is kind of outperforming that general trend. And so this is, a positive indicator for us. And one of the big drivers of this are a lot of the partnerships that they've recently announced. I don't know if you guys follow this, but they just announced that they will begin covering or offering Fenty, which is Rihanna's makeup brand that people love and previously only used to be available at Sephora. They're also going to be carrying Chanel. So they're kind of getting into this more prestige brand as well, which is previously where Sephora had been beating them a little bit. So it's interesting to see Ulta making these moves. And it's nice whenever you see those launches. I think the Fenty launched March 6th in Ulta, and we really did see a spike. We saw that move the needle in terms of consumers talking about going to Ulta or people talking about ordering these products through Ulta.
Megan, a couple things about your purchase intent versus sentiment. I noticed that the size of the circle indicates the size of the company, right? Which means Sephora and Ulta look almost identical in their size of the company. You can see that Glossier is much smaller in terms of overall size. Does some of the comparison between these two companies, Sephora seems to be a higher ticket price, but Ulta has that Target, partnership, which seems to be the perfect match for their customers. Explain the relationship between where these companies are, where their price points are, and why Ulta's further to the right but not higher on the vertical scale than Ulta.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you pointed that out, because I think this chart does a really good job of explaining what exactly we're seeing, because we do see Ulta outperforming Sephora when it comes to that building purchase intent. And a lot of that is because Ulta is improving its offerings. It's improving the brands that it's carrying, and it's kind of dipping into that traditionally Sephora prestige market. But Ulta also has those drugstore brands. And so that's why you see a little bit of a discrepancy in the consumer happiness levels, just because Sephora is seen as this luxury, this high-end brand, whereas with Ulta, you can go in and you can get, things that you would get at a Walgreens or a CVS, and now even at a Target. I think that it's also interesting to see, Glossier, we put that on there because this was a traditional e-commerce based makeup retailer. And you can see that it is underperforming as these stores like Sephora and Ulta with a physical location where consumers can actually go in and try on these products. Those are overperforming. And I think it's positive if you're Ulta that you see that, you're gaining that more near-term momentum than that prestige peer Sephora. And I love that you brought up the Target partnership because we're seeing really strong traction in our data. When we look at a quarter-over-quarter basis, we see those mentions of people talking about, buying Ulta products at Target up by about 30% quarter-over-quarter. So there's continued adoption there. I think on Target's last earnings call, they even said that, this was something that they're going to continue to build out, that, they're building toward 800 of these Ulta store-in-store experiences for consumer. And they actually commented that they could see a lift from those stores in terms of the beauty segment that carried the Ulta products. So I think this is a win for Target, but it's also a win for Ulta just to gain more exposure.
So yeah, Megan, you mentioned the Target partnership. They're aiming for 250 total for 2022 in those stores. And then, as you mentioned, 800 is what they expect to have in a few years overall, and that partnership is that. But there's another segment here as they build out their omni-channel business, right? So I'm hearing DoorDash delivers Ulta products now too. Is this something that you guys have any data on where people are actually doing that?
We do see some traction when it comes to omni-channel as a whole. So, once you have a certain brand of makeup that you like, once you've identified your shade that you use or your certain product that you use, it's easy to kind of use that. I know personally, as an anecdote, I am a Target Shipped member, and I think Andy jokes at me and says I'm an evangelist when it comes to this service because it's so convenient. But I have actually purchased Ulta products and had them delivered same day via Target. So I think that there are just a lot of options for consumers to be able to spend money with ultimately Target and Ulta there. But it is something that convenience element, that's something that consumers like. But I think just at least for this event, we're more keyed into that near-term momentum of people actually being able to go back into the store and discover new products and actually try on new things. And, there's just a higher demand for makeup in general on a quarter-over-quarter basis. And so that's something that, it's an additional tailwind that you can expect to continue to lift Ulta.
Hey, Megan, do you guys see any data? Because, as you go through the financial industry, you look at, inflation-protected areas in the market. And with your data, not only in Ulta, but maybe Sephora and other names in this beauty space, it's considered one of the inflation-proof areas. Is a lot of your data reflective of that also?
That's really interesting. And I think that another point that you can make whenever you think of something like Ulta is they not only have these prestige brands, which if you're buying a prestige brand, I think that is somewhat, inflation proof. If you're wanting to buy this brand, you're going to continue buying this because you really like it. But then they also have these drugstore brands. So for a lot of people maybe who are trying to save money, they can still go to Ulta and get, a high quality product that maybe doesn't cost as much as that prestige brand. They have a more diverse offering for consumers. A lot of the mentions that we see are people who are talking about, looking for dupes in Ulta. So looking for, kind of off-brand that, compared to the prestige brand. So I think that may be, a leg up for Ulta as you talk about maybe consumers tightening up their budgets a little bit.
Yeah, and you've got a plus 58% year over year on 30-day moving average as far as in-store mentions for that. Do you guys have a score heading into earnings? Are you positive on this company then?
I think our score, whenever we look at Ulta, is a 12. And I think that sounds a little bit underwhelming. And part of that is because a lot of this traction that we're seeing is, in the current quarter versus, the past quarter that's reporting. While we do take that into consideration, there has been, significant traction even in this last week. So I think that a case could be made that, while we're neutral, we're definitely slightly bullish or leaning much more bullish versus a just traditional neutral status because of these macro trends that are working in Ulta's favor and because we see it outperforming peers. I think that the bar is also, decently high for Ulta. So, technically our score is a 12. We are neutral, but, a case could be made for a more bullish outlook.
All right, great stuff. As always, Megan, thanks for all the data on Ulta ahead of earnings. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. You too.
All right, that's Megan Brantley, the Vice President of Research at LikeFolio.com.